Hi, my name is Tatum Jensen, and I'm going to be doing an informative speech today on Ted Bundy, a notorious serial killer. Alright, let's get started. When you think of a charismatic, handsome guy, do you usually correlate him with a serial killer? Well, this was Theodore Bundy, or as some may know as Ted Bundy. He was a college-educated man, and sources described him as intelligent, handsome, and sociable. From the outside, he seemed like a normal person and lived what seemed to be a normal life. He was very good about hiding his dark reality. The reality that he was a notorious serial killer whom physically harmed and murdered over 30 girls in the 1970s. Growing up, Ted had a difficult childhood. He was born in 1946 in Burlington, Vermont, and for the first 3 years of his life, he was raised by his grandparents as their own. He was raised by his grandparents because they were humiliated that their daughter had a child out of wedlock. Those first couple years, he was told that his grandparents were his parents and that his mother was his sister. This later surfaced as an issue in Ted's life when he finally realized that his so-called sister was his mother, and he began to have a resentment towards her because of that. Anyways, in 1950, Ted and his mother moved to Tacoma, Washington, and in Tacoma, his mother met Johnny Bundy, and they eventually got married, and Johnny eventually adopted Ted as his son and gave him his last name. In time, Ted's mother and stepfather ended up conceiving 4 more children. However, Ted was always very distant because he had sort of a distaste towards his father. He was just always very distant towards him. Well, his stepfather. And as a child, Bundy was very antisocial and shy. He had a hard time understanding social relationships with other people, and he started to exhibit disturbing and odd behavior as he reached his preteens. For example, he was known to rummage through trash cans and searching for pictures of pornographic material, whether it be a magazine or just like a picture in general. And he would also peep through the windows of women. So despite his unstable childhood, by the time he hit college, he became more social, and to the public eye, he seemed like a well-adjusted, educated young man. He ended up attending the University of Washington, and during his time there, he fell in love with a classmate named Stephanie Brooks, and they had a steady relationship for a while, but Ted ended up dropping out of the University of Washington and started working just random jobs, and he did some volunteering too. And around this time, Stephanie ended their relationship because she thought Ted was immature. This event was devastating to him. He had a hard time recovering from it, and even though he was devastated, he quickly re-enrolled into the University of Washington, and he eventually graduated from there with a degree in psychology in 1972. Throughout this time, he transformed himself into a more confident person, and he became an active member in politics and even worked on a campaign for the Republican governor. After the University of Washington, he ended up going to law school in 1973, but around 1974, he stopped attending. This was coincidentally around the time that women started to go missing. No one really knows when Bundy actually started to kill. There were a few cases before 1974 that people suspected he had something to do with, but he never would admit to the alleged crimes. The earliest murder that was documented in 1974, the victim was Linda Ann Healy, whom was a student at the University of Washington. She also was a radio host for the morning radio. Ted had broken into her apartment and knocked her unconscious, and then he clothed her and brought her to his car, and she was never seen again. After that, Ted continued to pursue female victims in the Pacific Northwest, he murdered 5 more women in the following 5 months. At this point, the police started a huge investigation searching for the missing girls, and as the investigation went on, more and more evidence started to lead to Ted. And the authorities also found the victims' bodies in the woods. And people started to give descriptions that matched Ted and matched his car, and more things just started to lead to him. So he ended up moving to Utah, where he attended law school, and he moved there so he could, and when he moved there, he continued to murder women. Although at this point, law enforcement was on to him, and there was one day when Ted was pulled over by the police and they discovered items that could be used for burglary crimes. And after that incident, the authorities began to monitor him more. So Ted ended up being arrested in 1975 for a kidnapping of Carol DaRonch. She was one of the few women who escaped his clutches. And at the trial, he was found convicted of kidnapping, and he was sentenced to a 1 to 15-year sentence in the Utah State Prison. Then, a couple years later, he was charged for the murder of Karen Campbell, a woman from Colorado. During the trial, he escaped 2 different times. The second time, he escaped to Florida. While in Florida, he broke into a sorority house at Florida State University, and he attacked 4 girls living in the house. And he ended up killing 2 of them. Ted was later found by authorities and was convicted of the crimes at the sorority house. And in conclusion, Ted was a rapist, a serial killer, and he took the lives of more than 30 women. He ended up being placed on death row and was executed in Florida's electric chair in 1989. Thank you for listening.